Muslims all over the world celebrate Eid Al-Adha. Eid ceasefire in Sudan hangs in the balance with new reports of heavy fighting. Plus, incumbent president of Sierra Leone, Julius Maada Bio, sworn in for a second and final term. Welcome everyone. The Nigerian Muslims today joined the rest of the world to celebrate Eid Al-Adha, or the Feast of Sacrifice, the second and the largest of the two main celebrations in Islam. Eid Al-Adha, also known as Eid al-Kabir, honors the willingness of Prophet Ibrahim to sacrifice his son Ishmael as an act of obedience to God's command. However, before Ibrahim could sacrifice his son in the name of God, and because of his willingness to do so, God provided him with a lamb to sacrifice in his son's place. In commemoration of this intervention, animals are ritually sacrificed by Muslims every year. Part of the meat is consumed by the family that offers the animal, while the rest of the meat is distributed to the poor and the needy. Here in Nigeria, prayers are offered at praying grounds where clerics preach on the significance of the day. Well, here in Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu joined the Muslim faithful at the Obalende prayer grounds in Dodan Barracks, Ikoyi, Lagos, for the Eid Al-Adha prayers. This is his first religious gathering in Lagos, his country home, or his state home, since he became the president. President Tinubu asks Nigerians to have faith in the new administration and support government policies which will be in their interest, while also calling for peaceful coexistence in the country.
This is not the regular praying ground at Dodan Barracks, Ikoyi, Lagos. The cloudy weather prompted this new open space for the 2023 Eid al-Kabir prayer. It's also a unique occasion because President Bola Tinubu joins Muslim faithful to pray here as President of Nigeria. Over the years, he has offered prayers here as APC national leader, senator representing Lagos State, and Lagos State governor. Chief of Staff to the President, Femi Gbajabiamila, National Security Advisor, Nuhu Rabadu, Deputy Governor of Lagos, Kadri Hamzat, former Governor of Lagos, and former Minister of Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola, who is also celebrating his birthday today, joined the President for his first religious gathering in Lagos, his home state. One message that usually rings loud and clear during Eid Al-Adha is sacrifice, peace and unity, as echoed by the Chief Imam of Lagos State.
That Allah does not love any call to tribalism or ethnic superiority among His servants, but He loves mutual cooperation, unity, stability, justice and righteousness. As we celebrate this Eid al-Kabir, let us forget our political differences and shun all out of violence to ensure peaceful coexistence and progress of our nation, Nigeria.
Former Speaker of the House of Representatives, who resumed as the President's Chief of Staff barely 2 weeks ago, appeals to Nigerians to give President Tinubu all necessary support to continue on his mission to unify the country.
Mr. President needs your support. As you have rallied around him, as you continue to support him, Almighty Allah will continue to support you as well. This is a difficult time for Nigeria, but we will turn that corner. We will turn that corner. All the President needs from you today and tomorrow is your prayers.
Meanwhile, Lagos State Deputy Governor Kadri Hamzat asked Nigerians to be patriotic to the country and pray for guidance for the president.
The spirit of patriotism will reside in all of us, so that we, in our own space, we will do the right thing for this country. Because it's not only the leaders, it is all of us. But we pray that our leaders, Ashwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and all our leaders here, on behalf of the people of Lagos State and the governor of Lagos State, we pray that God will grant you the fortitude to actually carry the weight of this country.
As he continues to play a leadership role for the country, President Tinubu says he's hopeful for a better Nigeria as he appeals to citizens to believe in his administration and his plans.
Have faith in the country. Have faith in yourself. Believing that you, as a citizen of this country, you must join hands. No religious identity, no tribal identity. Live with one another in joy and prosperity. It will come. Nigeria will see peace, stability, and God will grant peace to those of us who are in the war front. We spare their life, we give them victory. Those in the hospitals, we give them succor and peace.
Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin.
As the 2023 Eid Al-Kabir celebration continues, Nigerians are also admonished to imbibe the virtue of tolerance, peace, and unity.
Let's go over to Sudan now, where residents of the capital, Khartoum, are hoping the two sides in the country's civil war will respect the Eid ceasefire they have promised, although there are reports of heavy artillery and gunfire. In recent days, the city has witnessed some of the fiercest fighting yet of the 10-week conflict that's displaced close to 3 million people. Previous truces between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces have not been well respected. On Tuesday, the Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan called on young men to join his forces as he announced his Eid ceasefire amid reports of the RSF gaining ground. The RSF are said to be the dominant force in the city, occupying homes, markets, and streets. And the UN Refugee Agency says that humanitarian needs have soared among people displaced by the fighting in Sudan, with refugee numbers on track to surpass projections and aid access still extremely uncertain. Since the conflict erupted, over 560,000 people have reached neighboring countries, with Egypt receiving the highest number, followed by Chad, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and the Central African Republic. Based on the continuing violence, the UNHCR expects that its previous estimate of 1 million refugees will be surpassed.
The conflict in Sudan started on the 15th of April, a bit more than 2 months ago, and we've already seen over 560,000 people crossing into neighboring countries. We've seen nearly 2 million people displaced internally in the country. We have those who are affected by the conflict but cannot leave. We have those who are now internally displaced, as I said, 2 million people. Then we have those who fled into neighboring countries. And then you have people who are living in parts of the country that are not necessarily affected by the conflict, but they are seeing the consequences, the socio-economic consequences of the conflict. But all are in need of protection and assistance. The situation in Darfur is probably the one that is worrying us the most. Access into Darfur is limited, but we are hearing from those who are crossing into Chad a very difficult situation in Darfur. We're also seeing more and more of those who cross into Chad arriving with injuries. what is also quite striking and which needs to be underlined is how welcoming the host populations are. They are living in very difficult circumstances. It's a part of the country that is particularly poor, and they've also been affected by the conflict in Sudan. The conflict in Sudan is having socio-economic consequences on Chad and other countries in the region.
Well, the Special Representative of the UN Secretary-General for South Sudan, Nicholas Haysom, says that the bandwidth of the international community doesn't extend to include South Sudan. During an interview at the United Nations headquarters in New York, Mr. Haysom said the challenge which the conflict in Sudan has posed has pushed South Sudan off the agenda.
Undoubtedly, the challenge which the conflict in Sudan has posed for us is that it's pushed South Sudan off the agenda. We often say the bandwidth of the international community doesn't extend to including South Sudan. I think it's a mistake, because I think South Sudan is right in the middle of a very volatile region. We're watching a country really exhibit some of the symptoms of state collapse. And if you were to compound that with a crisis in South Sudan, it would really make the region very alarming. It would potentially be catastrophic for the Horn of Africa. In an economic crisis, it's extremely dependent on foreign aid, certainly as dependent as Sudan. And it's facing natural and climatic shocks, floods and drought simultaneously. It's got a serious problem with delivery of humanitarian aid, and the fact that it's clear that we will not be able to retain the same levels of support that we've had previously.
The incumbent president of Sierra Leone, Julius Maada Bio, has been sworn in after being declared the winner of the presidential election. Although the opposition has disputed the count, official figures give Mr. Bio 56% of the vote, and his main rival, Samura Kamara, trailed far behind with 41%. A candidate needs more than 55% for outright victory and avoid a second round. After the first tranche of results were released on Monday, Dr. Kamara called the outcome daylight robbery. International election observers also highlighted problems with transparency in the tallying process of Saturday's vote that took place amid tension. However, President Bio is calling on Sierra Leoneans to keep the peace even as the 59-year-old begins his second and final 5-year term.
I'm chairman of the Electoral Commission for Sierra Leone, who is Mr. Mohamed Kenewi Kone.
I hereby certify that Bio Julius Maada, having polled 1,566,932 of the valid vote cast, representing 56.17% of the total valid vote cast in the 24th June 2023 presidential election, duly elected President of the Republic.
Security forces in Burkina Faso say assailants have killed 31 soldiers and 3 members of the Homeland Defense Volunteers, a group of civilians given basic military training. The army said more than 40 assailants were killed. The volunteers work alongside the army, typically carrying out surveillance, information gathering or escort duties. The attack on a supply convoy took place on Monday in the northern province of Bam in the central north region. At least 10,000 people have been killed and more than 2 million displaced in the prolonged jihadist insurgency in the Burkina Faso has been facing from neighboring Mali. And still to come. The African Union force in Somalia hands over more military bases to the Somali army. Details. Welcome back. Over the past 3 months, the security situation in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has continued to deteriorate in Ituri and North Kivu. This is according to the UN Assistant Secretary General for Africa, who was briefing the Security Council on the situation in the DRC.
Over the past 3 months, the security situation in Eastern DRC has continued to deteriorate in Ituri and North Kivu, despite a lull in armed clashes between the M23 and the FARDC. Thus far, the ceasefire between the M23 and FARDC has relatively held and contributed to some security gains. The relative calm in Rutshuru territory, for example, has enabled more than 45,000 people from the Bishusha group to return to their homes. Despite the joint operations of the FARDC and the UPDF, the ADF has extended its area of influence to an unprecedented level and remains a serious threat to the security and stability of the DRC. At the same time, the persistent activities of armed groups in South Kivu for the control of mining sites, in particular, Mai Mai militias, reminds us that it is imperative to resolve the root causes of the conflict in Eastern DRC for peace to be restored. We urge all armed groups to cease hostilities and call for a redeployment of national security forces, particularly in Ituri, to restore state authority in this area. The population, especially the most vulnerable, cannot remain without the protection of the Congolese state. The consequences of this absence are deeply worrying.
In Kenya, opposition leader Raila Odinga is calling on his followers to boycott taxes and fight the newly signed government finance bill. He made this known at a rally in Nairobi, the latest in a raft of anti-government disobedience measures. Mr. Odinga, who lost the election to President William Ruto in August 2022, has already led several rounds of protests, some of which have culminated in violence, and repeatedly asked his followers to engage in acts of civil disobedience against a government whom he accuses of raising the cost of living and consolidating power. On Monday, President Ruto signed into law a contentious government finance bill that would double the fuel tax and introduce a new housing levy.
Through civil disobedience, we will deny Ruto the taxes he thinks he can extort from us by force.
Kwa sababu Kenya haina kazi. Mtoto ameelimishwa.
Let us embrace tax boycotts. Let us deny Ruto the fuel tax by limiting consumption of petrol and diesel. One way to do this is to carpool. Let us arrange to make regular journeys in a single vehicle whenever possible. We know the men and women who visit these unjust law owners. Punish the traitors. Let us name, shame, follow, and isolate the traitors at every turn. Let us picket their public and private offices and their homes until they join the call to have the Finance Act repealed.
Elsewhere, South Africa's Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor says last weekend's attempted mutiny in Russia would not be affecting African efforts to engage authorities in Moscow and Kyiv about the war in Ukraine. Ms. Pandor said this after talks with her German counterpart, Annalena Baerbock, in Pretoria. According to her, the African peace mission to Kyiv and Moscow was a preliminary visit, and the leaders of both countries had agreed to further meetings in the next few weeks. Earlier this month, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and other African leaders visited Russia and Ukraine as part of a peace mission.
There isn't a mutiny. There was an attempted mutiny. That would be the language I would use. And it will not affect our intention of continuing to engage with both countries, as has been agreed by the presidents who were part of the Africa peace mission.
Well, in the meantime, the United States says it will very soon announce actions to hold the Wagner Group accountable for its atrocities. According to the U.S. State Department spokesman, the move will be over the mercenary group's prior activities in Africa and won't be linked to the aborted mutiny in Russia over the weekend. Speaking at a daily press briefing, Department spokesperson Matt Miller did not detail what the planned U.S. action will be, but when pressed, said it will be announced this week.
We continue to closely track Wagner's activities both in Ukraine and in Africa and in wherever in the world they may operate. We continue to look closely at the actions they take that are against the interests of the countries where they operate, and we will continue to take actions to hold them accountable. And in fact, we will have further announcements to make on holding Wagner accountable in the very near future. Whatever you call Wagner Group, I think what's important are the steps that we take to hold them accountable. And the United States has taken another number of steps to hold Wagner accountable in imposing sanctions, as I said, indicting the head of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin. And we will continue to take steps to hold them accountable. I don't think the label is as important as what we do. And I would say stay tuned. In the very near future, you will see additional steps by the United States to hold them accountable for actions they've taken. I would say with respect to Wagner, we would continue to urge any governments who have considered inviting Wagner to operate inside their borders, who have considered security arrangements with Wagner, who have considered any sort of cooperation with Wagner at all, we would continue to urge them to not pursue those arrangements. I would not want to get ahead of any other announcement that we were considering taking, but the announcement I was specifically referring to relate to their actions in Africa.
The African Union force in Somalia has handed over 3 more military bases to the Somali army as part of a gradual withdrawal expected to conclude by the end of next year. By the end of June, the plan is to withdraw around 2,000 troops from Somalia. The handover took place in Mitakwa and Haji Ali in the middle of the Shabelle region bases, which are under the control of the mission's Burundian contingent. So far this year, the AU force has handed over 6 military bases, 5 of them in Middle Shabelle. Somalia has been training new soldiers in Uganda, Ethiopia and Eritrea to replace some 19,000 AU troops currently deployed. This is happening as Somalia prepares for the second phase of a major military offensive against Al-Shabaab. UN humanitarian agencies are warning that climate, armed conflict, high food prices and post-COVID-19 economic fallout have all caused record food insecurity in the Horn of Africa. Elizabeth Albrecht, the World Health Organization's incident manager for the Greater Horn of Africa Emergency, says an estimated 60 million people urgently need help. About 5 million children under the age of 5 are estimated to be facing acute malnutrition in 2023 in the Horn region.
About 5 million children under the age of 5 are estimated to be facing acute malnutrition in 2023 in the whole region, in the Greater Horn. That is about 10.4 million. That is just a staggering figure. What we are seeing at health facility level, so what our colleagues are seeing in clinics and in hospitals since the beginning of this year, are the highest level of severely malnourished children who now come into these facilities with medical complications since the crisis began 3 years ago. Many of the ongoing disease outbreaks, such as cholera, measles, we have been seeing last year and this year very high numbers of malaria as well. So with the impact of flooding, we see these diseases worsening. Malaria, I would like to remind you, is one of the biggest killers in the region.
Almost 3 years of drought has given way to rains and devastating flash floods. While we just concluded a rainy season which performed better than predicted, one rainy season is not enough to bring an end to the crisis. And as we end the program, we leave you with pictures from around the continent
of Muslims celebrating Eid Al-Adha, which coincides with the end of the Hajj, the annual Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. I'm Joke Rogers. Thanks for watching, and do have a beautiful celebration. Bye for now.